Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio, big nonprofit ideas for the other 95%. You're listening to our live coverage of the Next Gen Charity Conference in New York City. We're coming to you from the AXA Equitable Theater in the city, and I'm joined now by Andrew Noyes. Andrew is Manager of Public Policy Communications for Facebook. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for taking time on a busy day. I know in your responsibilities, you're managing and developing relationships in Washington. What are Facebook's interests in our nation's capital?
Well, it's an interesting question, and there are lots of answers I could give, but I want to take a step back, actually, because Facebook has kind of ingrained itself in many people's daily lives.
Sure, that's part of the national fabric, I think. Certainly, 300 million, is that the number you're using now, or is it
more than 500 million people
behind
on Facebook?
Oh, I'm 2 months behind. Okay, more than half a billion people. Okay,
but one thing people don't often think about is the fact that we're only 6 years old as a company. It's only been outside of the university space for a few years, so we're still very young, and Washington is sometimes slow to understand new technologies. Things move very quickly in Silicon Valley, and they move quite a bit slower in Washington. So our role is really to help communicate to Capitol Hill and to the federal agencies and nonprofits and think tanks and official Washington. Our role is to communicate to that crowd what Facebook is, how it can be used, and what our priorities are on the policy front.
And some of those policy issues, I'm sure one of them is cybersecurity.
Certainly. I mean, we think of our work in a couple of different buckets. I would say one thing that folks are probably not surprised to hear about is that we care a great deal about user control of their information, their content.
We do see. I think
a lot of people would talk about privacy,
right?
But we see it more. We see it more as a discussion about user control, because we give people on Facebook the tools to really decide exactly who sees everything you put out on Facebook at the time you decide to put it out. A lot of it is just kind of helping educate our users on how to make use of those tools. But that's a big part of our job, and obviously user safety, internet safety. Ours is a service where you've got to be 13 years old and up, but there are really kind of rules of the road that young people and really all people need to understand about putting yourself out there on social networks. So we do a lot of education and outreach around safety. Also, as you mentioned, cybersecurity, free speech is a huge issue. 70% of our users are outside of the United States, and believe it or not, there are a number of countries who aren't so keen on people organizing and talking about politics and
yes, I've heard rumors to this effect.
Spreading democratic values elsewhere. So free speech is a big part of what we talk about.
What's the reaction in bureaucratic, slow-moving Washington to the messages that you're trying to bring to it? What kind of reactions do you get when you're sitting down with staffers, committee staffers, public policy makers, people who are in the agencies that you're talking to? What kind of reaction do they get when they're...
Well, in 2007, when we had one person on the ground in Washington, my colleague Adam, his job at the time was to help get members of Congress and federal agencies on Facebook and to describe to them what Facebook was, because at that time there was very little understanding.
Yeah, just 3 years ago.
Just a couple of years ago, right?
Your point.
So now we're in a really fortunate position where almost every member of Congress is on Facebook. We have a number of, I would say, several hundred federal agencies and offices are on Facebook.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So we're now at a point where we're not having to explain to obviously the individuals who work for those agencies are on Facebook personally. So we've moved beyond a point where we need to tell people what Facebook is. We now have to help them use Facebook the right way, to optimize their experience, which is also what I'm talking about here at the Next Gen conference, really kind of optimizing your Facebook experience, because it's not enough to just set up a page, because you've got to engage. It's about an authentic conversation that Facebook that nonprofits or brands have with users, because it's an important relationship. People aren't going to like your page if they don't support what you're doing. So once somebody takes the action of liking your page on Facebook, it's your responsibility as an administrator to stay engaged and keep the content fresh and keep people coming back and involved with what you're doing.
Excellent. So let's pursue that. Let's digress from Washington, D.C.
Sure. We could talk about
staid and bureaucratic there anyway. The audience is small and mid-sized nonprofits. What other advice do you have for having them optimize, as you say, optimize their Facebook presence?
Sure. Well, I think one of the first things we usually tell people is Facebook is a conversation. Facebook is very different than Twitter or other social media services. I like to think of Twitter as a megaphone. It's a great vehicle for spreading a message to however many followers you have, and they are retweeting that message. With Facebook, we think of it as more of a conversation. You're engaged, there's back and forth, there's dialogue. We believe it's a much more authentic conversation on Facebook. So then the communications that nonprofits need to have on Facebook need to be authentic. They can't be basically reposts of press releases or a status update with simply a link to your latest drive. You've got to give your people a reason to keep coming back, and we would encourage nonprofits and anybody who has a Facebook page to really kind of go on Facebook and think about what are the pages that you as an individual are gravitating towards. And then those pages are probably doing the right thing. They're asking their fans questions, and their fans are getting involved in the comments section. They're posting photographs of volunteers at a soup kitchen or at a food bank, or video of your latest 5K run to benefit a charity. So it's really about kind of that rich multimedia experience, and again, the engagement, the authentic engagement is very important.
Are there features of Facebook that you feel nonprofits are not exploiting fully in trying to develop their relationships?
Well, actually, one feature that is overlooked, and I mentioned it on stage earlier, is the Insights tool. If you're a page administrator, you've got a great dashboard of really interesting information, aggregated, anonymized information about the people who are fans of yours on Facebook. And you can see what demographics are responding well. You can see what times of day your content is getting shared more. Yeah, I mean, there's just a really rich repository of information that a lot of people don't even think about. And so, we certainly urge people to look at those insights and make their decisions based on that.
Where is it? How will we find it? The Insights tool.
So if
on our page.
If you're a page administrator,
right,
then there's a whole admin section of your page, and that's where you'd find it.
Okay.
But two very simple rules of the road when it comes to posting on Facebook. We've learned that traffic is at an all-time high around 9 a.m. or 8 p.m. So that's when you should be posting your most meaningful posts. Now, that doesn't mean don't post at all in between 9 a.m. and 8 p.m., but post the most engaging and interesting things that you really want to get out there to your audience at those times.
You have such a wealth of information because there are over 500 million people using Facebook. That's great advice. Roughly 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. What other advice do you have based on, enormously valuable statistics that most of us don't have access to?
Well, and something else that a lot of people ask us is, how can I get 100,000 fans? I want 100,000 fans by next week. Well, if you're a local nonprofit, if you're a small nonprofit in a small community, and you're a very specialized nonprofit, the fact of the matter is you're probably not going to get 100,000 fans. But what you will get is are maybe 100 fans or 200 fans or even 300 fans who care enough to seek you out on Facebook and care enough to click the like button, and that's saying something. So, we certainly advise people, look, if you're a small nonprofit, don't set your sights too high on fan count, and also don't only think about fan count. Some people are obsessed with their fan count.
Yes.
And we don't really feel like that's productive, because if you're obsessed with your fan count, then you're not thinking about your content. And the content is really key. And if you're posting really interesting content, then organically your fan count will grow, because people will be sharing your content with their friends on Facebook.
Before I switch gears, is there anything else that any other advice that you shared with the audience, maybe, or that you want to share with our audience of nonprofits about optimizing their relationships on planned giving on Facebook?
No, I think we kind of covered it.
Okay.
I would put in a plug for our our nonprofits on Facebook page.
Please do.
Which is facebook.com/nonprofits. And on that page, your audience will find a number of resources, tips, tricks to really optimize their experience on Facebook.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for that. You're listening to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio live coverage of the Next Gen Charity Conference in New York City, and I'm with Andrew Noyes. Andrew is manager of public policy communications for Facebook, but we've gone beyond his public policy and communications Washington D.C. role. Let me ask you, Andrew, about older Americans on Facebook and their renowned privacy concerns. I know Facebook is growing. I think the 55 to 65 year old segment, or maybe I have the ages a little wrong, maybe it's 60 to 65. That the penetration in that segment is growing rapidly, but there are still privacy concerns that older Americans have. What can you say to address those concerns? Because there are some nonprofits who are trying to engage older Americans, maybe around planned giving or maybe for volunteer management. How can you assuage those privacy concerns that their older constituents would have?
Sure. Well, I would say that one of our fastest growing demographics is the AARP set.
Okay.
So we're talking 50s, 60s, 70s. It makes sense that people's kids and grandkids are on
sure.
Facebook. They're sharing vacation photos. They're sharing holiday pictures. Milestones throughout their lives that members of the family want to be part of. So it makes sense that older Americans are getting on Facebook, and we certainly hear people's concerns about privacy issues, but we would also encourage people to kind of take the personal responsibility to click the privacy, basically look at your privacy settings. I mean, people will complain about privacy, but they haven't kind of taken matters in their own hands.
They're not managing it.
So it's very simple. I mean, if you go to the account box and click privacy, there you are. And we actually recently introduced a really intuitive dashboard that shows you on the opening page exactly what your privacy settings are, and lets you in a very simple way manage those buckets of information in a very user-friendly way. Admittedly, it took us a while to get to that point, because Facebook started out as a very basic service, and over time we added functionality, we added features, we continued to innovate, and then we had privacy settings that were kind of not centralized across the site. And so we made a very concerted effort to centralize that experience and then enhance that experience by giving people true control over their content. And so if older Americans, or if anybody on Facebook really is concerned about their privacy, then we would encourage them to go to their privacy settings and ensure that everything is locked down as tightly as they want it to be, or as openly as they want it to be. A lot of people want to share. They want the world to hear what they're thinking, and we think that's fine. I personally have some information that I only share with friends. Other information I share with a bit of a broader group, friends and their friends, and some of my information is public. And it's how you feel personally, how comfortable you are personally with turning loose of information or holding it close. And we give people the power to control every single thing they post at the time they post it.
All right, so it sounds a lot like the insights advice you had for administrators of nonprofits. People need to be taking personal responsibility for the privacy settings, and it is quite robust. I mean, when you do go into privacy, there's a long list of checkboxes and radio buttons and things
Sure.
you can.
If you want to customize, I mean, some people do want to customize every single thing. They want to know if you want to get really deep into the privacy settings, you can. But if you want to just set very basic privacy settings across very large buckets of information,
Okay,
you can.
that's true. That's available
so
too. Right.
You have both.
All right.
And again, I mean, I'm also saying, Facebook certainly has the responsibility to continue to educate individuals and continue to kind of let people know that the information is there, because some people don't. So we'll continue to do that in forums like this to really show people where they can control their information.
All right. It's an important piece of Facebook, and an important part of being I think an informed user of Facebook, which we all have an obligation to do. My guest has been Andrew Noyes, and Andrew is Manager of Public Policy Communications for Facebook. You're listening to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio live coverage of the Next Gen Charity Conference. Andrew, I want to thank you very much for sitting down with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure.